Hello and welcome, my name is Vin. I wanted to demonstrate the Copic April set comprising of earth tones. These earth tones include E04, E41, and E47. So basically, I felt it was a pretty nice mix of earth hues, so I wanted to go for it. And today I'm going to be sketching out a Sumatran Orangutan from start to finish. So yeah, let's just go for it. I'm going to be working out photo reference from the Sacramento Zoo. So yeah, let's just go. So yeah, my tool set is relatively straightforward. I'm just going to sketch out with a little mechanical pencil action first, and then we're going to go ahead and ink it afterwards using Copic multiliner SPs. I like to use 0.1 and 0.2 with a little bit of others in between. So yeah, let's just keep on going. We're gonna keep it pretty loose, honestly. But yeah, there's a bit of interesting warmth in these colors, so I honestly, I'm still practicing the use of earth tones in my work. Since I tend to skew a little hyper-saturated, I tend to not practice my earth tones quite as much as I should. I say that despite the fact that I've actually drawn a decent amount of rocks in the past, but I still ultimately skew towards being a little oversaturated. So as a consequence, I don't have the most experience with some of these earth tones. And so as I'm sure many are well aware, the numbers in Copic markers actually refer to the saturation and brightness. The first number refers to saturation. So the lower that is, the more saturated it's going to be. In contrast, the higher that first number is, the less saturated it's going to be. So if you had like a green that was like 94 or something, it's going to be less saturated than like a 04 or something. That second number refers to brightness. So the lower it is, the brighter it's going to be. The higher it is, the darker it's going to be. So if you look at the E47, it's kind of in the middle of the saturation range, if you will. And then, but it's also going to be pretty dark since it's E47, so that's going to be a very, very dark color. Whereas E41 is going to be a lighter color because that second number is smaller. Whereas E04 is pretty much high saturation but middle value. So we're going to be using that E41 quite a bit to block in some of the colors, and then we're just going to fill in with the rest. But yeah, I'm pretty stoked. I really wanted to pick up this set and practice. I mean, ultimately, I'm probably going to have to practice this set a few times. This is the very first time I'm using the set. And as a consequence, it may just take a few tries. So I have the intention of actually doing more of these videos in the future in order to monitor and document my marker process. So like, I've been using Copics for a while. I really started to get serious with Copics in 2016. I experimented with them a little bit in 2014 and 2016, but pretty much 2016 and 2017, I really started to get into the whole flow of the medium, and I like a lot of sort of flexibility with my mediums, and you can get a lot of mileage just out of one Copic marker, so it's pretty fascinating in that way. Yeah, so we're kind of blocking this guy in. This is Sumatran orangutan from the Sacramento Zoo. And yeah, it's gonna be pretty fun. So as I'm sure some of you more surmised just from my channel, my one of my prime passions is documenting gardens through both photography and video, though I also like drawing them on site and through reference as well. But yeah, as a kid, I was also not only into plants, but I was also into a lot of birds and fish as well. So I drew those quite a bit as a kid. Other mammals I did on occasion. Though, when it comes down to primates, I honestly haven't done one in a little while, but that'll be fine. Just to kind of get to see the outline of this guy here. So from my understanding, the orangutans don't really come out too consistently at the Sacramento Zoo. So when I visited last month, I was pretty stoked to actually be able to capture one via photography. It was pretty cool. Yeah, so as you can sort of surmise, one thing I could stand to be doing a little less is sketching with the pencil. I could stand to be doing a bit more defined lines. So one of my sort of idiosyncrasies with Copics is that sometimes my sketch isn't the most defined in the world, so when time comes to use a multiliner, sometimes the inking can get a little haphazard, so still learning in that regard. Okay, I'm gonna step back and take a look at how we're doing so far, and yeah, so far so good. Let's just keep on keeping on. So I'm gonna sketch for just a little while longer and start to ink. Whenever I am doing stuff on site, I attempt to finish the sketch in ink within about 20 to 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes a little longer than that, of course, depending on the subject. But yeah, so I actually don't entirely know what this orangutan's doing. I think it was just on the cusp of finishing eating or something. I don't entirely remember. Sort of just in the moment of beholding the majestic animal. Yeah, so. Another idiosyncrasy with my Copic practice is that I tend to use a lot of disparate colors, so I'll try to keep analogous color schemes. However, sometimes I work across saturation a little too widely, but sometimes when you're confronted with these limited hues, it really brings out your ability to maximize each marker. So yeah, it's a little wide. Proportionally, he's a little squashed. Which stems from a bit of haphazardness, honestly, but I'm just gonna go ahead and play off of it. I mean, you could probably correct it just a skosh here, but honestly, I did get a little too wide with him, but that's perfectly fine. So we're gonna use a multiliner 01. I just got ink. Yes. Yeah, so this is actually also an experiment with just camera positioning. So if anyone feels that the camera should actually be a little more overhead, that's something to play with as well. So this is actually a bit of an experiment as well as a bit of a learning process for me. So. Yeah, so his sort of furs is all over the place. It's definitely got a nice flow to it. So we're going to try to encapsulate some of that fur direction in the way we color it. So I mean, to a certain extent, we can also do some of it in the inking as well. However, I feel like a lot of it is going to stem from the way we color it. Yeah, so this is on a Copic sketchbook. The really nice part about using one of these is that the paper has a nice sort of sturdiness to it. So you can actually kind of work into it with the ink. And also, it won't shift around so much when you're working with it. Some of the vellum out there is quite wonderful. However, it'll definitely slide around a bit if you don't prepare. Whereas this is sort of a ready-made system, as it were, but it really allows the markers to pool well on the surface, meaning when you're using Copics, it won't overly bleed or spread as you're working with the paper. Yeah, so once again, I'm actually working out photo reference of this particular orangutan. I, of course, would ideally work from real life, but just for the sake of setting things up and having the camera set where it is, we're going to go ahead and just work off photo reference for today. But it also might take a bit of gear to set this up on site, but it certainly would be quite cool to do so. So this is with a 0.1. So what I'm going to actually do is go ahead and work with double the thickness with the 0.2. So originally I had the multi-liner SPA set comprising of 0.03, 0.1, 0.3, and 0.7. So due to certain circumstances, I actually don't have my 0.03. A bit of an accident, one could say. But I'm currently working with 4 different multi-liners, that being the 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, and 0.7. Yes, looks a little more happy in my rendition. Let's go ahead and step back. Okay. Yeah, working out pretty well. I'm gonna go ahead and erase the sketch lines. Yeah, so I tend to operate on a bit of straightforward angle in terms of sketching on the paper as well as inking on it, though of course there are many other ways of proceeding, this being a bit of a more simple method, but it'll work for now. Okay, so obviously I primarily have used the 0.01 up to this point. So what we're going to do is diversify the lines a little bit using the 0.03. Yeah, so it's a little tentative looking right now. We'll probably compensate by using the E47 to block out some of the darker blocks of color. We won't really have a need to do all that via the inking in itself, though. We can certainly help that process along right now. It'd be super cool actually streaming this live, though of course that'd be a little easier on with digital media. I think it'd take a bit more equipment to stream from the camera. But of course it's possible, I just need to actually investigate the whole process there. Okay. Yes, I'm trying to maintain some of the directionality of the fur. Those you can see, there are definitely some areas that are not totally blocked in just yet. So let's go ahead and actually, I'm going to step back and take a look at it. So let's see. So I think we're at the 20-minute mark. 19-minute mark. Yeah. Okay. There's a homely little fella, isn't he? Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and maintain more line variance, create more line variance, especially regarding the fur. Okay. Yeah, so, fur is obviously a bit of an interesting texture to encapsulate via color. We're gonna try to do so, though I make no guarantees that it will necessarily be optimal or ideal. It will be pretty fun working with it. So. Okay. Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's a bit more variety that we could implement. However, we're just going to go ahead and begin coloring shortly. Okay. So yeah, that's the first part of all this. The Sumatran Orangutan from the Sacramento Zoo, and next we're going to be actually using the Copic April set to block in some colors. So let's get started. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and block in the Sumatran Orangutan's colors. So I actually haven't used the sets at all, so I have to pry this open. This is the set of Copic markers for the month. Stay inspired, keep inspiring. New Copic markers are released on the first of each month. So I actually wasn't aware that there was a monthly set until last month. I'm not entirely sure how long it's been going on for. Yeah, I got the March and April sets, so it's pretty stoked. The April set being greens. So I actually have it right here. It's really striking. Obviously, if you know me in any remote capacity, you know that I like greens. So YG17, YG23, and G17. So yeah, that's super exciting. So we're gonna go ahead and start using the E41 Pearl White to block areas in. So of course, it's going to be really important to maintain the white of the paper, because if we don't do so, it's going to get pretty muddy pretty quick. So let's go ahead and do this thing. So the reason why I even chose the Sumatran Orangutan in the first place is that I felt its fur lent itself to this certain combination of hues. In retrospect, we may or may not actually be able to encapsulate the orangeness of the fur, but I think it's going to be okay. E04 isn't the most orange in the world, but I think it's going to be okay. Yeah, so this is, of course, it's a bit of a learning process for me as well. But this is actually really fascinating. There's a lot to be had with these hues. So as anyone would experience working with Copics, they are very layerable. They can lead to all sorts of combinations, especially if you start utilizing the colors blender. You can really sort of get gradations that are really wonderful to look at, really. That's nice. So also, as someone working with Copics would learn over time, the same saturation is the same blending family. So E41, E47 are designed to essentially blend together. A lot of Copic sets are sold in sets of 3 for this purpose. However, obviously it is up to you whether you want to actually follow that or not. Yeah, so this is actually pretty fascinating. He is a lot more orange in the reference, but honestly, the intent was not to necessarily have one-to-one representation so much as pretty much just playing around with blending families and you know, creating our own take on this majestic creature. So you can see his face still has a little while to go. But we're going to try to keep some of the whites of the paper as well, though. Quite honestly, we would probably have to add a lot of darker lines to really, really bring out that fur movement. So if we want to get really greedy, what we could do is actually just go ahead and use the chisel tip to like completely mark this out. Yeah, no harm in a little bit of action here. So of course, we don't really necessarily want the chisel lines to be so visible, so we're going to go ahead and knock them out a bit. Pretty fun working with just 3, man. It's it ain't easy, but sometimes the challenge of Copic drawing stems from your decision making as well as your ability to work within limitations, because you're not always going to have, you know, every marker available, and so as a consequence kind of working outside your comfort zone really shows. It's pretty nice. Yeah, so as you can see, it's pretty empty in the right side of the sheet here. Also, as a total confession, my computer darkened the screen. So I was without a reference image for a few seconds there. So yeah, also the one thing with Copics is that each marker, unlike digital coloring, or more specifically, unlike a default Photoshop brush or something, you can really achieve different opacity levels with the same marker. So you can see this is E47, but I'm actually going back in with the same color, and you can see this is going to dry a little darker than this. So this is actually part of the fun of analog coloring for me. The physicality of working with the paper and basically interacting with hues that way. The interplay of creating hues by working with the paper is quite thrilling, and that's not necessarily something that you can always experience unless you have specific brushes in your digital coloring app of choice. Of course, nowadays, what with brushes such as Kyle Webster's kit and numerous others out there, it's a lot more thrilling to work with digital coloring due to the sort of way those brushes work. And you can sort of approximate the way real media works with digital brushes nowadays. And there are also other possibilities because you can, you know, experiment with color more readily. You can also play around with blending modes. So it's just kind of a matter of your own taste, really. Though, for me personally, you know, being able to dig in with the same marker, being able to dig in with a blender, being able to layer things is just a really, really thrilling process for me. I thoroughly enjoy working with analog media, though it is not necessarily the fastest way of achieving the result you want. And obviously everything is a destructive workflow, which is sometimes a little fascinating and also a little frightening, but you get over it after a while. So yeah, this is a Sumatran Orangutan from the Sacramento Zoo. I have never used any of these three Copic markers before, so this is pretty fascinating for me. The majority of my experience with Copics is with cool hues. So YGG, blue green, blue violet. It's another thing I love about Copics. You can really tell what a color is just from the letters as well as the numbers. So BV00 is going to be a very saturated, very bright blue violet. I like the ability to readily understand that. So we're gonna really work into this paper. Of course, the general rules that you're really supposed to work dark to light with Copics. Or I'm sorry, I meant to say you're really supposed to work light to dark. The reason for that is once you work put darks down, you're not really going to remove them anymore. So sort of on a personal note, I get a little reckless layering later colors on top of darks, just because I like to sort of fill in the marks, if you will. That's kind of a general way of putting it, but also just in colored pencil terms, it's called burnishing. or you take another pencil and just kind of layer it on top to sort of basically fill it out. You can burnish with a colorless blender, you can burnish with a white pencil, those would have different results. So the burnishing process really fills the color out. It's kind of a generic way to put it, but accentuates the color might be a bit more accurate. So let's actually go ahead and step back and check it out. So yeah, this is what we've got so far, and you can really check them out. So probably one personal critique I would have is that my lines are way too consistent. Also with fur, I would probably want to be doing other things to basically create the feeling of having more fur. So for instance, this is a little too on and off here. I would probably want to do a bit more of a pattern here, but this being a sort of sketch in a way, in terms of the way I've executed it, as well as a sort of just way of jumping in. Not everything's necessarily perfect. I actually intend to use the April color set for more studies. So yeah, this is a study of a photo that I took in the Sacramento Zoo last month. Yeah, you know, there's definitely some things to tweak, but this being a rapid study, I think we can definitely say that we've gone places, so that's exciting. This is definitely a fun set to use. You know, I was probably overestimating the warmness of it, but sometimes the happy accidents are the really fun parts of working with Copic markers. So one thing to be cognizant of with this specific marker pen is that due to the way I like to sort of work the paper, you get some bleeding, so I've bled a little bit here. So yeah, you don't really want to go without putting an additional sheet underneath unless you want some of those earth tones to go into the paper underneath. But yeah, this is some thrilling stuff. I love this set. I'm a little sad that I was not participating in the March set last month, but that's not to say that I can't, you know, go whole hog and do it this month or next month as well. Yeah, this has certainly been fun. So we're probably gonna wrap things up. Shortly after we put some touches in. So yeah, this is a very fun take on a familiar medium, because sometimes working with 3 hues really brings out your ability to bring out the most out of each marker. And of course, since it is in fact marker, can't really undo it once you make those marks, but that's part of the fun. Yeah! Okay, so this is the April Copic color set, and it's a lot of fun to work with. You can pick it up on Copic's site. And yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. This is Vin, and I look forward to putting more pictures and video of Copic marker processes in the future. So, thank you very much.